Yeah, that's why you turn it off. It's nothing to do with the sound. It's just it looks good on camera.
Yeah.
Welcome to Thursday nights on Get Vocal. How's it going? This is Crawlspace. What's up? I am Tim here with Lance. What's up, Lance?
What's going on? I mean, it can't get any better than this. This with the pandemic and the isolation, Thursday night is the only night I know during the week. Every other day you could tell me it's Sunday, Tuesday, Friday, but Thursday is the only day I know because we're here.
We are here in the present. The chat room is filling up on Get Vocal. We are streaming live to Twitter, to Facebook, and to YouTube right now, this very second. But the best way to interact is to join on Get Vocal. Follow that link if you're watching us on one of our social pages right now. And Lance, I've got to mention that guy down there in that box.
How did he sneak in?
He's in there.
A little devil worshiper, Jordan.
Welcome, Jordan Bonaparte. How's it going?
Howdy, guys. I'm doing great. It's good to be here streaming on all these different platforms by simply clicking a few buttons. I feel like a modern man for real now.
It's easy as pie.
You look like a modern man. It's been some time since we had a conversation and joined each other on our respective shows. So yeah, thanks for coming on. Got a lot to talk about.
It's been too long, but the band's back together.
No, I feel like we're all Barbra Streisands here.
Yeah, well, we're all a little scruffy. Do we got like COVID beards? I know, or is the cameras just really sharp and Get Vocal?
I got a little bit of a beard going.
I shaved this morning. I trimmed it right down this morning.
Oh, nice. So it looks good.
I cut my own hair yesterday, and I couldn't be more proud of myself.
Really?
It looks fantastic.
You trust yourself with that, Tim? I thought you'd have a team that would come in to make it look like that. Wow,
that's a trick. It's a trick.
Or you're just you're being modest. I cut this myself.
No, I took a razor with a one of those fixtures on it. I mean, it's not perfectly even by any means, but it's
no, it's not perfect at all.
There's 2 or 3 hair follicles that are
way off.
Yeah, ratios off. What's up, Christina?
Yeah, hello, chat room. Jordan, tell us what's going on in your world. Tell us about your podcast, the Nighttime Podcast.
Yeah, well, I think first of all, what's going on in my world? It's a strange world, of course. In Nova Scotia, I'm in Canada, in Nova Scotia, and we're dealing with the coronavirus, much like everyone else. So the whole city is shut down, the province is shut down, the world is bizarre. Going to Walmart feels like a really crappy episode of The Walking Dead, but I still go. I've never realized how much I rely on non-essential businesses. My hobbies, turns out, are going to non-essential businesses for no good reason at all, it turns out. Mm-hmm. But my show is the Nighttime Podcast. I cover Canadian crime, Canadian missing persons cases, and just kind of weird stories from Canada. So I like to think of my show as sort of like a strange version of Unsolved Mysteries that only airs and films in Canada.
It's brilliant. Brilliant way to describe it.
Yeah.
And I got to say, your brand is on point. Your logo is kicks ass right now. Very reminiscent of the Twilight Zone. The font is it's got a Twilight Zone feel to it, but it's got the Jordan Bonaparte flair to it in its simplicity. I love it.
Well, I call it a you do know what a doily is? Like you go to your grandma's house and she would have like a doily that she'd make you put your drink on or something like that.
I got one right here.
I call it the doily logo because it's kind of like, it just says nighttime. It's sort of like a doily thing around it. Maybe my grandparents were weird and that's why I made that connection with style. But yeah, anyway, thanks.
Yeah, and it looks like an old book that you're going to open up and you're going to get like a good story out of.
Yeah, that's cool. That's better than doily. Yeah. Thank you.
It is an excellent show. Check it out if you haven't already. You've got some really incredible series, like mini series on there. Emma Philippoff, Nature Boy,
That's a deep cut now. That's been a couple of years.
Yeah, Glove Guy.
Love guy.
It's a great one. Lindsay Suvanarath. These are things I'm rattling off the top of my head here, Jordan. I'm not looking at any list here.
Creepers.
But tell us, because you also cover UFO stuff, and I listened to one that you did a couple of weeks ago about UFOs and the declassification of the Pentagon, those Pentagon videos we talked about it here. Yeah, we talked about it here on Get Vocal a few weeks ago. And Lance is all like, nah, that's bullshit. That's nothing. And I'm like, Lance, dude, that's for real.
And I'm like,
absolutely for real.
Yeah, way.
No, it's like that story's really cool. It's been around a long time. Like if you're into kind of the UFO world, those videos and the story behind them is like, it's almost become legendary over the last 5 or 10 years or something like that. But it's I think the average person will see those videos or see screenshots from them, and it's not as it's kind of underwhelming when you look at it. But when you realize that these aren't videos shot with like, some person with their cell phone or something, they're taken by super advanced high-tech cameras that not only film video, but also track motion and speed and all these different things. Cause it's video filmed by these fighter jets weapon system. And it's, so it's almost like the holy grail of UFO videos. Because of course, when you have somebody pointing their phone at the sky filming something, there's lens flares and there's all these things that you can argue the credibility of the video. But when you're talking about weapon systems, fighter jet, it's a different kind of story. And I don't know. So the videos have a lot of credibility for that reason. But what adds to it a lot is the fact that the government seemed to kind of suppress them at first. Wasn't very forthcoming with if they were real and whatnot, and eventually they've just, I guess, given up and authenticated them and released them publicly. So the videos themselves have one story, but then kind of the story of the videos making it to the public eye is its own separate story. And you probably got into this if you covered it under your show, but Tom DeLonge, the singer for Blink-182, is kind of like at the center of the whole thing, which is just so cool.
Yeah, we didn't get too deep into that. But I think it was mentioned maybe by John Lorden. But I also want to say that John Lorden said that, he was like, why can't these videos be HD? He was like, this is bullshit.
That was John Lorden subtly campaigning for a job in like a contract job with the military so that he can go in there and be like, hey guys, I got it.
But Jordan, there was a really good explanation on why that wasn't HD on your show. And as soon as I heard it, I was like, that idiot, John Lorden.
Yeah, well, it was my guest, MJ Benias, in that episode. He's a fellow Canadian. He's a investigative journalist that does a lot of work in UFOs and paranormal stuff. And he's one of the guys who are kind of at the front of getting the story and telling it. So he knows the stuff inside out, but really it's like the video, what it was filmed by isn't something that's made for filming video to be viewed. It's more so used to track objects in the sky. So if you're a fighter jet and you're flying, at the bottom of your fighter jet, you have basically just like a ball that has this camera built in that's looking for other fighter jets or other things in the sky, figuring out where they're going, how fast they're going, what direction they're going. And it allows your weapon system to target them and shoot rockets at them or whatever it is fighter jets do. So it's not like a camera that's used in the sense of to film video and capture images. So it's not the purpose of it to get a really high quality video. But a lot of people who see this video, that's what turns them off, and they're like, "Oh, that's bull crap." But it's there's more to it than that. It's almost like if you had an X-ray of your lungs and you could see an anomaly in your lungs, you wouldn't look at that X-ray and be like, "Oh man, it looks like crap. It's not in color. It's not clear." It's a different kind of photo or a different kind of camera with a different purpose than, you know, pointing your iPhone at something.
I am so jealous that you're able to articulate it that clearly.
Wow.
I would never be able. I would still be going on and on. I wouldn't have even gotten to the point at this. I would have just rambled right off the face of the earth.
Yeah. Well, it's the if you didn't get much into the Tom DeLonge thing, that's its own really cool story. You know who he is, right? Tom DeLonge. You know who I'm talking about?
Yeah. Musician.
Yeah, like Blink-182 was a huge band. It was him and another guy were kind of the lead singers, and then Travis something was the drummer. But anyway, this band, if you don't know them, they're like a pop punk band, but they were one of the biggest rock bands on the planet at the time. I guess probably like early 2000s or something. So they had a ton of hits, touring the world, making a ton of money. And when they were, I don't know if I'd say if they were at their peak, but they were still very near the peak when Tom DeLonge just walked away from it all, left a ton of money on the table. And basically when asked why he left the group, to a lot of people, his answer involved, I want to pursue, like, you know, my passion, which is the UFO phenomenon. So I think a lot of people probably thought he was nuts. And for years, he's been saying, I'm connected with important people. There's more to this phenomenon, and I'm going to, you know, reveal it or take a part in revealing it. And what he did over the years is he got a collection of people who are all insiders in that industry, the defense industry. So it's people who worked for the Pentagon or worked for companies that worked for secret projects that the Pentagon was working on. Tom DeLonge kind of got them all together. They started a group called like To the Stars Academy of Arts and Science. And when the company started, the big thing that they did to start was basically release these videos that some members of the group had been able to get from, you know, the secret government vault or wherever. So that's kind of how this whole thing started, is them sharing these videos, and it became a really big news story over the years, and it still is. So it's, if you're in the UFO world, every couple months or year, these videos resurface in some interesting way. And the most recent way they resurfaced was the government authenticating them and releasing them.
Now, what's your feelings about the timing involved with them just suddenly putting it out there and saying these are now authenticated and declassified?
Well, a part of me thinks, you know, like Trump has this Space Force and all this, and maybe it's a way to add credibility to funding, you know, the Space Force.
Yeah,
that's what some people think. But I think my guest on the episode I did about it, MJ, what he told me is basically his opinion is that a lot of press and journalists have been hounding the Pentagon and the Defense Department for statements and trying to get information on these videos, that by simply releasing them the way they did and releasing a statement along with it, any press contacts they get, they can simply refer to their prior statement and just basically wash their hands with it. I could see that happening as well. So
but
a part of me thinks there's not much to it. I would like to think that, you know, it was this big power play by Trump, but I don't know if he's that smooth.
He's definitely not smooth, but you know, he saw these videos and he was like, Space Force, we need the Space Force. Like,
yeah, well,
yeah.
So
you know, there's people behind him though that are like, Space Force is going to be, you know, we can get trillions of dollars. We can get trillions of dollars. We just need to convince the public that what we're seeing in the sky is a threat to them, and we need to defend ourselves here on Earth.
But these videos took a really interesting path to get to the point that they're at now. Like, so they were leaked, and then the government just put them out. And I mean, so that, because when they were leaked, it was like, well, are these even real? Well, that's not a question anymore. They were authenticated by the Pentagon. They were real, you know, and you hear the Navy pilot, or you hear them in the video, the Navy pilots, but you know, there's an interview with them too. I just think it's
those pilots Yeah, a lot of people involved in these videos have come forward and given interviews. There was a TV show that Tom DeLonge and his group was involved in on it was on the History Channel. That was basically a long form documentary about these videos and the people involved in them. So there's no question the videos are real. What they filmed are anomalous objects that were showing flight capabilities beyond anything that modern science has at this point. And that's really all there is to it. What they were, God knows.
Well, come on. We know what they are.
Aliens.
Weather
Definitely aliens.
Obviously aliens. But I thought it was interesting. Your guest said something like, if it was a human in there, they'd be like Jello, but because of the way that the craft moved.
Yeah, the speed it moved and how sharp the turns and how tight the turns it was making was just well beyond what like a fighter jet can do. And you hear it in the video, like because the video have captured the audio from the cockpit, and the pilots were blown away at what it was able to do. And these are fighter jet pilots who track, and do exercises in the air with the world's fastest and best aircraft.
I mean, you could call them fighter pilots, or you could call them actors.
Oh boy!
All right, here we go.
I told you, Lance didn't think it was real.
Is it a coincidence that Top Gun 2 just got greenlit?
It's a whole different branch of the military. Is it a coincidence that Space Force on Netflix is coming to Netflix?
None of these things are coincidences.
Yeah, but the Space Force one is like Aaron Sorkin. Like that's not even that's not a government run funded show.
Oh,
fun of Space Force, I think. Steve Carell is in it.
I had to watch that, but I don't know what Space Force is going to solve. But maybe there's more to come of this. I'd be down with more of this coming out. There's a lot more to be revealed eventually. I'm sure of it. It's too weird. It's too weird. I believe in it 100%. Despite Lance,
and I do.
It's okay.
I do want to move on, but this is a step towards disclosure, or this is a I forget how you guys described it.
An act of disclosure.
Right.
So it's not the government's not revealing they're in cahoots with these other alien life forms, but they're kind of opening the curtain a bit and showing us some of what they have.
So when we look back in like maybe 20 years, if say things change completely, move towards disclosure, you may look back at this moment as being like smoking gun video potentially.
Yeah, like our grandchildren and their alien girlfriends and boyfriends will be like, this is one of the things that made this relationship possible.
Well, Tim, you just mentioned Aaron Sorkin, and I mean, Aaron Sorkin is responsible for The West Wing, A Few Good Men. I mean, these are military. These are The West Wing, for God's sake. This goes right to the top. Goes straight up.
Conspiracy theory?
Let's go straight up to the top. Yep.
Well, I don't think the Space Force is going to do the actual. I should say I don't think the Space Force TV show is going to do the Space Force branch of the government any good, because I think they're making fun of them.
Well, they were certainly making fun of the Air Force when they made Top Gun 1. Did you see the volleyball scene?
I'll give you the Kenny Loggins song is
which one?
In the volleyball scene. That one's, just too on the nose.
Yeah. I turned off my air conditioner, and I'm gonna end up looking like Val Kilmer. Sweat glistening on me.
All right. Well,
some bad jokes being cracked in the comments here. Brock Willis says, what kind of currency do aliens use? Starbucks. Come on.
Yeah,
the bad joke
is alive tonight. Join if you're watching this on our social media feeds. Check us out on Get Vocal. Start your own account. It's the best way to interact. We can actually invite you on too. You guys want to open this fourth box up?
Oh, is that what
open the box?
There? I was wondering if there was a special guest, like a voice from our past.
Let's do it. It is officially open. Now it is.
Oh, we got a certain Dan. Certain Dan just joined the room.
I want your meme creator to come in there. Like your I see so many memes about you guys from.
Oh, Esther.
Esther
Yeah,
Hilton.
Esther. I love it.
She is one of a kind. That is for
That's
sure.
one way to put it. Yeah.
Yeah, she's excellent. She is in the UK, however, and
Okay.
likely asleep at this time of night.
Hmm.
But you know,
She'll catch the replay.
yeah, maybe. I don't actually.
She'll
yeah,
give
I
us a
don't
lot
think
of crap for it.
Yeah.
All right. Who's going to grab the spot? We got a spot wide open there. I think it's probably pretty intimidating.
Chris
Don't be
Duet
shy.
says Esther told me I have your blessing for her to be on Criminal Perspective. I mean,
Here we go.
sure. I would love to hear her on Criminal Perspective.
She also has a weird obsession with one of my feet now.
Whoa.
All right, I'm gonna go.
It's
You
Shelly.
came to a weird place, Michelle.
It's Shelly Kazuba.
I feel like I needed to get on here and defend myself because, you know, despite what you might have thought, I did not actually put the Jameson in my coffee. I was merely telling you about it.
I was very confused. I'll give people a little backstory. I got a text picture message from, yes, my club foot. We got a picture message on a group thread, and we get a picture message from Michelle, and it's a picture of a cup of coffee in a glass, and she's on her porch or
In a mug.
in a mug, but it was clear, so you could see it. Right. So so in a mug. So I think I made a joke like, "Hey, you should put Bailey's in that," and then she said, "It's Jameson." And I got confused. I thought you were drinking, and I even said, "Well, hey, it's 11 o'clock. Might as well." So,
And I work from home now.
right, and
Yeah.
I'm not judging whatsoever. So
Sounds judgy.
it was a little judgy. I mean, I was, yeah. I think maybe this is actually an intervention. We have Dr. Shiloh and Dan and Sarah Turney's here, and Chris Duet, and we're all here to help you.
Oh, here to help me. Well, I just want to point out there that the coffee that we brew every morning is Canada's finest Tim Hortons coffee, which is like
Wow.
number one in our house. Dan can back me up on this.
Wow.
We only drink Tim Hortons coffee in here.
No kidding.
I will. Well, Jordan, you should respond to that.
It's a loaded topic. That's like getting into politics here in Canada. I'm worried my Canadian listeners will be divided if I give any opinion one way or another.
It's like the Dunkin' Donuts of Canada, Jordan.
It's more than that. It's a social institution here in Canada, but it's also kind of a politically charged because they not too long ago were sold to the company that owns Burger King, which is like a Brazilian restaurant conglomerate kind of thing, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of their marketing is still Canada, you know. So it's some people think that the Tim Hortons that they grew up loving doesn't exist anymore.
So sad.
Yeah, it's kind of sad a bit, but it's we also have the big competitor here in Canada now is McCafe, like the McDonald's coffee.
Come on.
McDonald's coffee is not bad, I will say. It's
I thought they were really good.
it's surprisingly not bad.
Mick, shut up.
Yeah, I know.
It's a lot better, like not in the US. Like I've had like McCafe like outside of New York in the US, and it's a lot better than it is here.
I gotta say though, I have to say we have our Dunkin' Donuts here, and the coffee from Dunkin' Donuts is not good. I've had Tim Hortons coffee. It's right on the same level as Dunkin' Donuts, I think. But
Yeah.
if you're going to make a comparison or have a competition, a friendly competition between Tim Hortons and Dunkin' Donuts, you have to go to the Timbits versus the Munchkins.
Oh, Timbits for sure.
Oh,
I don't know
boy.
what a munchkin is. Is that a Dunkin' Donuts?
A Munchkin is what Timbits ripped off.
It's a donut hole.
Yeah.
The donut.
Okay.
Yeah, it's what they took out of the middle of the donut.
Yeah.
And yeah.
So I didn't come here to start like a huge debate,
No,
but it
it's
just
too late. It is
No, it's
way
it's
too
too
late.
late. All right,
Show's over.
we're neck deep in
In
this.
fact, we have to rank them now. Okay, so Starbucks,
Here we go.
right? Where are we at? You guys, please give your individual rankings.
We should
Is it just coffee, or are we talking like
think-
ice cream tea, or
I think we just have to go
Coffee.
stick with coffee.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think Chris Duet's losing his mind right now.
ah, Well, it's hard because when we're talking international audience here, there's a lot of different coffee from around the world. I think most of us can agree that Starbucks is overpriced and maybe a bit too strong.
Yeah, I think it's my number one though.
What?
See,
I don't know. I'm with Jordan on this one.
Maybe I'm basic, but it might be a little overpriced. I'll give you there, but it's good.
Wow.
I'm a Pete's guy if we're going for Seattle-based coffee. I'm a Pete's guy.
We're just going for coffee. I mean, I like Pete's too, but it's not as widely available.
Yeah, you just got to know where to look. You gotta go down those alleys, Tim. You gotta flip over those trash cans. You gotta get the truth.
You brewing Pete's every day? What are you brewing?
I have. Are you asking me?
Yeah.
I'll take a picture of where I have all of my labeled where Pan Man is in the kitchen.
Yeah.
There's probably 4 bags of Pete's right now. I got 2 Major Dickinsons and a couple of French roast.
And you order these online?
Target.
Target,
Whole Foods.
Yeah. Okay. Well, this wasn't on
And
the
online.
list anyway, though. But this wasn't on the previously discussed list.
Yeah, and Chris, I make Jill coffee out of a hairnet in the toilet. Speaking of weird coffee, there's that coffee that comes from like cat poop, and it's like $50 a pound or something.
Ew.
Yeah, I heard about that. Was that they were talking about it on Rogan or something one time, where it's like the cat eats the beans, and then when the cat digests it, they brew that.
I don't know.
If that's the case, maybe I need to start a side business.
Yeah,
We have enough cats here.
there you go. Yeah, for real.
Might as
We're
well.
gonna make coffee from Eric's poop.
All right. Well, let's see. Jordan, you want to talk about some crime a bit? Some Halifax crime?
Oh, well, there's
Some more coffee talk.
We're really jumping from topic to topic. UFOs, coffee. Let's jump into crime. That's the logical next step.
Right.
Very on brand.
Gotta be.
Yeah. Well, I'm in Nova Scotia, so people who follow crime, I think no matter where you are in the world right now, you probably heard about what happened in Nova Scotia. We had it's hard to tell time because of the pandemic. I don't know how long it's been, but about a month ago, we had Canada's worst act of mass murder happened in a small town outside of. I live in Halifax, which is like the capital city of Nova Scotia. A small town of 1,000 outside of the city. There was a mass murder event that killed 22 people, and then the gunman died as well. It is now Canada's worst act of mass murder. So that's kind of, if you're talking crime in Nova Scotia, that's the story right now. You guys heard about this, I'm assuming.
Definitely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's terrible.
It's a heavy one. I can't even understate how much of an impact it had on the province. It's all people are talking about, obviously, and with this many people involved, everybody has a connection to somebody involved in this in some way. So it's a real sensitive story in Nova Scotia. But long story short, what happened, for people who don't know the story, is this 51-year-old man who's a well-known denturist, makes dentures. He's a wealthy guy, millionaire. And he had, like, right downtown, not Halifax, but Dartmouth, which is the neighboring city, right downtown, he had a denture clinic. It was this big building with, like, a big smile and, dentures, like this big thing on the side of the building. Anyway, but everyone kind of in this area knows this business because of the big smile that's on the side of the building. But anyway, what he ended up doing was, it started with a domestic assault against his wife, his common law partner. He beat her up and handcuffed her apparently, and she fled the house, survived. And he from there just went on a spree, dressed as a police officer. He had been known to collect police memorabilia, so he had a police uniform on for some reason. And he also was buying and refurbishing old police cars from auctions and stuff. So in his garage, he had 3 police cars, but one in particular that he even had all the decals made, so it looked exactly like a police car. It had the lights on the top. He even had this thing added to the front that would allow him to ram other cars and not damage his car. But what he ended up doing was dressed as a cop, driving a cop car a car that you would never know the difference between it and legitimate cop car. He just drove from place to place, killing people, including traffic stops. Like, he pulled people over. 2 people he pulled over and went over, just walked up to them and shot them. And it seemed like they don't really know exactly why he targeted the people he targeted, but he was traveling kind of around that part of the province from house to house and knocking on doors or lighting homes on fire. He had brought a bunch of gas with him. Apparently, shortly before the attacks, he bought like $800 worth of gas. So some people he'd murder with firearms. Some he was just lighting their houses on fire, probably while they slept. Eventually, he killed a cop. He drove his police car, head on into a cop car, an actual cop car, and this is on a major highway. And he got out of his car and walked over to the real police car and shot the police officer involved. And somebody driving by like pulled over thinking that they were going to maybe help 2 police officers who had an accident. And he killed them and took their car. Eventually, he ended up at a gas station. One of the victims, the last person he murdered, he took their car as well. So he's kind of changing cars at the end. Turned out the car had no gas in it. He had to stop at a gas station, and an off-duty police officer recognized him and shot him and killed him. And that's kind of how the whole thing ended. But it's just an absolutely insane story and so tragic. And everybody who died was just, what's really hard is a lot of people, or some people had a connection with him. They either lived near him or maybe knew him in some way. But it seems like along the way, it was a lot of people were trying to help the people he was killing, and they were getting killed. So he'd light a house on fire. A neighbor would come to help and get shot to death. That sort of thing. The person who pulled over on the side of the road to try to help got killed. Yeah, it's really, really nuts.
Is there anything that's coming out about his past? Anything that people are saying he was? What's going on?
Yeah, it's actually my latest the 2 most recent episodes of my podcast. I'm calling There Were Red Flags, and they basically go through everything that's surfaced from his history that make you say, like, this guy's always been volatile. He takes kind of the idea of a bad drunk and brings it to the most epic scale. Like, a lot of the things from his history involve violent outbursts after drinking, including he brought his parents to Cuba to a resort 15 years ago or something, and completely unprovoked attacked his father, beat him unconscious, and a resort employee had to intervene. One day at his denture clinic, a 15-year-old boy was standing waiting for a bus at a bus stop right outside the denture clinic. Just so happens that there's a bus stop there. The denturist thought he was a little too close to his building and went outside drunk, attacking him, and got arrested and charged for that, and was prohibited from carrying firearms for a while because of that.
Is he a native from the area?
Yeah, well, he's from New Brunswick, which is the neighboring province, but he's lived in Nova Scotia for like 20 years or something. But what's another thing that's really heavy is a lot of stories have surfaced about domestic violence, him having complete control in an abusive relationship with the woman who would eventually survive his attack. But stories came out from neighbors who witnessed really extreme abuse against her, and this story has so many awful little stories within it. It's like hell.
Well, we're obviously not up there, so we don't get the news as frequently or as as frequently as you do. This doesn't seem like something that happens there a lot. I mean, Canada is not known, no insult to us, but kinda. Canada's not known to be like the United States, where they have shootings and acts of violence like that so often. What do you think it was? What do you think it was that pushed this guy over? I mean, do you think that he was just that one anomaly?
It's hard to say. Like, what's for sure is that he had an interest in firearms, and they were illegal firearms, is what we know about them. He had a big problem with authority, it would seem. including a problem with police for whatever reason. He seemed to have extreme violence in much of the issues in his past. So to me, it seems like it's just he was just a ticking time bomb waiting for the right thing to happen. But it also, what's come out is that he's apparently was paranoid and all anxious about the coronavirus. So maybe, like, I'm thinking it was just almost like the perfect storm of like a ticking time bomb waiting to go off, and things lined up in such a way, and this is what came of it. And the fact that he had a police vehicle and a police uniform that allowed it to go from, you know, a murder suicide or something into this horrible thing, because it wasn't until far into it that people were able to realize that it was a cop doing this stuff. The way they were tracking his car is, you know how like on the side of a police car there'll be like numbers that indicate the car or whatever. What ended up happening was the next morning, like the attack started up at I think like 11 o'clock at night. His common law partner ran into the woods handcuffed to hide from him. She didn't come out until the next morning. And when she came out, she went to a neighbor's house and called 911. And it was her that told them that he was dressed as a cop and driving a cop car. And she had a picture of the cop car that he had refurbished so they could see the number on the side of it, the serial number, whatever. And that's how they were able to identify what cars were legit and what one was maybe him. But he was going around all night, you know, doing stuff unchecked. They didn't realize it was a police car. And it's become a big debate when the police found out that this was happening versus when they informed the public that someone dressed as a police officer was killing people. That's become a big thing because they didn't send out, you know how like you can get that update where your phone buzzes and it'll be like, you know, there's a red alert, there's a missing person or something like that, missing child. That didn't happen. And the government or the police have been criticized, rightfully so, pretty heavily for that, because I believe it costs lives by not letting people know about this.
Yeah. How long did it? Oh, sorry. How long did it go on for? Yeah.
Went on for 13 hours. Yeah. So it started it started at like 11ish at night, and it ended at like 1 o'clock the next morning, the next afternoon. I remember when I was actually leaving the grocery store, and I had the updates on my phone, like reports of an active shooter, and there was a tweet that went out from the police saying avoid this area, and it was far from where I was, and I was in the grocery store, and then I started getting messages from home saying like, are you following what's going on? You need to get home. And then I looked at my Twitter and I saw the police had tweeted like, this person's driving a cop car, they're wanted for murder, and they were coming basically like on the highway towards right where I was. So I was like, oh shit. So I went home, and by the time I got home, I heard the news that they got him and it ended. But yeah, it's awful. It's a nightmare. You can see a lot of like there's a lot of, for people who don't know the story, there's a lot written and published about it on the Canadian press. So there's a lot you can read. It's really heavy, and the story's still just coming out. The press is fighting tooth and nail with the police to get information released as to what actually happened, and it's a slow burn. So the information's slowly coming out and just gets worse and worse as it does.
Was this something that he was planning because he was getting the cop car sort of prepped? I mean, how did he get this by his common law wife? Like, he just said that he had a hobby taking cars and refurbishing them to, restoring them to police car status. I mean, he must have been planning this.
That's kind of what I think. But he has police officers in his family. I think his uncle was RCMP, and maybe a cousin as well. His high school year. So there's a 51-year-old man who did this. His high school yearbook has recently come out, like a photo of the little write-up. And it even said in there, like, he has one day will be a police officer. So he's always had an interest in police, and he collected the memorabilia. Like, he had different uniforms and all that sort of stuff. But for whatever reason, he was buying the scrapped, decommissioned police cars that would have all the equipment removed from them. So it was just an old, whatever model, a Ford Taurus or something. He was buying them, and he had 3 or 4 of them that he was having restored. But one in particular, the one he used for the crime, he had the lights on it. He had decals made, so it was exactly a replica of a police vehicle. In fact, better equipped than the average police vehicle, because he had this big kind of thing added to the front that would be used for like ramming vehicles, I guess. But it's he didn't keep any secret about having these vehicles. He was showing, like, people who were patients of his at the denture clinic gave stories to the press of him showing them like photos on his phone and just being like, look what I do. I'm into cop cars. And he's told some people he was going to take them to like car shows, and everybody kind of had a different story from him as far as why he had them. But he's had them for some time, but there's a question about whether or not it was premeditated. I think one thing that's really telling is the fact that he bought $800 of gas before he went and burnt a few people's homes with it and set fire to cars. He was burning cars along his rampage as well. So I think that kind of speaks to maybe premeditation.
$800?
Putting the ram on the front of the car, that's premeditation.
What is? Sorry.
Putting that thing on the front of the car to ram into the other cars.
Oh, right.
That's premeditation.
He was just trying to be authentic, Michelle. He was just trying to be authentic.
Yeah, but I'm just like,
a Ford Taurus with a ram on it.
Yeah, and it's like I've seen cop cars with that sort of thing on the front, like just a big metal kind of, not like a regular grill, but like a big metal thing on the front. I've seen cop cars with it, but if you were going to restore a cop car to be like, oh, I got this cool cop car and I love police, you wouldn't get like a feature like that. To me, that's a bit telling. The fact that he bought the gas is telling, but at the same time, he had a bunch of motorcycles as well, so maybe he'd have a reason to have a bunch of gas, but I don't know. I'll have gas. Yeah, exactly. It's a lot of money. So I would be really surprised if more evidence doesn't come out that shows that it was a premeditated incident in some way. To me, it kind of has maybe some similarities to that Las Vegas gunman thing. It keeps reminding me of that, where it's just this older guy just did something horrific and unimaginably cruel,
right? And seemingly sudden, seemingly random, like
and
then you find out all these details about him and you're like, oh, okay, why didn't anyone see the signs? Why didn't anyone see the red flags here? Because this person's been exhibiting them for a long time. First of all, I don't want my dentist talking to me about anything personal, so that's a giant red flag. What is he doing? Like, are you in the dentist chair and you just want to get out of there? And he's like, hey, look what I do in my spare time. No, we're not at a bar and we're not hanging out.
Yeah, it is weird.
Get me out of here.
That said, I have a really cool dentist, and he's always plays Zeppelin, and he knows I like Zeppelin. So when I'm in the dentist chair, he has like this really nice stereo in his dentist office.
That's nice.
Yeah, he'll play Zeppelin and do his thing, and I don't mind going to him. But he's never shown me anything that's like. I think the idea of a cop car, someone redoing that, to me, that strikes me as weird. But if you think of how sinister it is to use the cop car and the symbol of police in that way, like during this attack, like it seems like some people were targeted because they had a connection to him in one way or another. So maybe he was driving to people he knew that he had a beef with his house and killing them. But some people that he pulled over, pretending they were speeding or something and just going over and killing them, these were people he had no connection to whatsoever. One person was this older lady was just for a walk on the side of the highway in this super rural area. Apparently she made this walk every day. It seems like he didn't even stop. He just slowed down alongside her and shot her out of the window and killed her. So it's a completely random murders. So it's nuts.
Oh man.
And one thing, what's interesting, my next episode. So I did one episode about this. It's called like the timeline, and it just goes to the timeline of all the murders and what happened. The second part is covering kind of the red flags from this guy's past. But the third part that I'm releasing over this weekend looks at the domestic violence in this guy's history and some of the stories that came out related to that. But what's really kind of telling. If you look at Canadian mass murder, so that we say that this is now Canada's worst mass murder with 22 victims. Right behind this, what used to be Canada's worst act of mass murder was this school shooting at a women's university in Quebec called the Polytechnic Massacre. And it was basically one guy who was extremely misogynistic, went into the school and specifically targeted women who were pursuing engineering as a field. And he killed 14 women and injured 14 more. And that was like specifically a misogynistic attack. Before the one below that is 11 murders was the incel van attack in Toronto, where an incel guy rented a Ryder like moving van and just drove it down the sidewalk of a busy street in Toronto and killed, I think it was 11 people. That was Canada's third worst act of mass murder. And it was incel. So it's, misogynistic, gender-based violence. And then the fourth was a guy in Vernon, BC, who murdered his estranged wife and her family. I think it was, I don't know if it was how many people exactly died in that, but if you look at Canada's worst mass murder, all four of them were crimes against women, gender-based violence, domestic violence. Like that's all kind of boiled in it. And it's really telling. My third episode is an interview with a journalist from Global News who discusses the connection between domestic violence and gender-based violence with mass murder. And it really blew my mind hearing her give some stats and give some background on some of the things this guy did to his wife or was said to have done to his common law partner, not his wife.
When was the I know the that the incel one was in the past was recent, in the past year.
Like 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah. Were all of those that you just mentioned in the same, like maybe 5 or 6 or 7 year period?
Maybe in the last, like the Polytechnic school shooting, I think was in the 90s, like 20 years ago or something. Okay. But all these are the 4 worst mass murders in modern Canadian history. So say like the last 100 years. The oldest one would have been the school shooting at Polytechnic, which I don't know exactly the date, but I'm thinking mid to late 90s.
Wow.
Yeah, it's heavy, and
that's an interesting connection though, that you're making the association between that and the misogynistic nature of the perpetrators. That's fascinating that there is that thread.
It's weird that that's the 4 biggest, and then if you look at the ones below that, they're almost all drugs and organized crime related. If you look at the American stats, it's a bit different, but it's I just thought it was really telling.
Well, the American stats, I mean, I don't know if you've been following the news, but public shootings have been way down since the middle of March. So we're doing pretty well.
Yeah, well, you did have an incel motivated shooting in an Arizona shopping mall last week.
I'm just being sarcastic because we've all been in isolation, and that's my
it's
sarcasm.
Still happening. A guy in Arizona.
Yeah, because like domestic violence is up and things like that.
Yeah,
I can say that with certainty because that's something that even just at my job that they talk about a lot, and when the DA does his town hall meetings for our county, that's one of the big topics because people I think it's really easy for a lot of us to take advantage of the fact that when we're home, we're safe, and for other people, home is not a safe place. Mm-hmm. So that's been something, I know my colleagues who were in the domestic violence unit and the child abuse unit have been working like around the clock. Meanwhile, I kind of have doing financial crimes now, I kind of have a little bit more of a flexible schedule, even though people are still scamming each other. We don't have those same, kind of domestic violence issues that we have to worry about. And it's frightening. I couldn't imagine, like as a woman, I couldn't imagine not feeling safe in my home, especially in a time like this.
Yeah. And also another, like there's that side of it, but also if you think of the crime that is kind of like ideologically motivated, like the far right or the incels, so much of that happens when it's kind of a lonely person or some kind of a off-center person is just like at home on the internet. And right now there's a whole lot of people at home on the internet getting deep down.
Isolation.
Yeah. So like, I'm thinking like, say like that incel attack that happened in Arizona last week. like people like that, it's like now's the time that they're probably making the connections and stuff, and that's kind of scary to me.
What do you think it is about people who are at home and behind their computer screen and plotting? Do you think that they were just wearing a mask of sanity, and now this is something that triggered them?
I think there's a lot at play with the as far as how people can become radicalized. If you're talking like ideological issue,
No,
crimes.
I mean, like, how do you know what the real person is? You know, is the real person the one that, you know, talks to your face and is cordial and polite, or is it the person that is spending all their time on the internet and trolling and escalating topics to a violent level? And then that gets like in their bones and they become violent themselves.
Well, you know, people are all shades of gray, and I think of it as like there are people who have something inside them that's almost like this cancer of hatred or something. And, you know, in the middle of the night when they're sitting home on the internet and becoming someone else, you know, that cancer can kind of spread and take over, and bad things can start happening. That may result in them going on YouTube and calling us horrible names in the comments. Or maybe that could lead to them, you know, clicking on a link that leads to something that's, you know, this is why 5G internet or whatever it is going to screw with us. You know, I don't know. I think people who are damaged can in some way can just get it. The internet can be a dangerous place for them, for anybody, especially if you're young, if you're impressionable, if you're, you know, not satisfied with your life and you're looking for something to belong to. There's a lot of harmful causes that will be happy to have you.
Man, I want to talk about coffee again in Timbits.
Yeah, let's get back to that.
I know. We're going to talk about the Satanic Temple or something more light, like the Satanic Temple.
Yeah. Well,
I wanted to ask Jordan about the Emma Filipoff case, and I was wondering if anybody in the chat, if they've ever heard of her story or heard of that case, because I remember stumbling upon it, you know, through many searches on the internet, and you know, I saw that you had covered it, and I was just wondering what your take was on it.
Yeah, it's I did a 7 or 8 part series about Emma. Emma Filipoff is she disappeared from Victoria, BC in 2012, and her story is really, really sad and tragic and full of kind of coincidence and mystery. It's so we're here with Tim and Lance. I see some connections between the way her story is told, Emma's story is told, and the way Maura Murray's story is told. But for people who don't know the story with Emma, she moved away from, she grew up in Ontario. She moved away and she was living in BC. I don't know how many hours away from home that would be, but it's a good ways away. Not the kind of place you drive back and forth. So she was on the other side of the country in a different city, basically. But while she was there, initially she was living with an old high school friend from back home. She moved out of there, kind of bounced around from place to place, and slowly she became living in a women's shelter. So bordering on homeless. Emma's a real like artistic, creative person who kind of lived in an offbeat life in a lot of ways. So it wasn't unusual for her to be living kind of in this bordering on a homeless type life. But anyway, what ended up happening was leading up to her disappearance, she made a series of phone calls to her mom back home saying, you know, Mom, you know, things aren't working out. I need to come home, buy me a plane ticket. Her mom's like, yeah, sure, Emma, no problem. The next morning, Emma would call back like, Mom, cancel the ticket. I'm going to work this out. It's fine. Her mom would say, okay. Later that day, call back, bawling and crying like, I can't do it myself. You got to come here and help me come home. Mom would agree to it. And anyway, it went back and forth. And then finally, like, her mom didn't know she was living in a women's shelter, but she saw this name on the phone, like Sandy Merriman. She assumed that was Emma's friend or something. And she dialed the number back to like call Emma and check in on her. And that's when they answered, like, Sandy Merriman women's shelter. And Emma's mom then realized things were really bad, and she decided, I'm not going to tell Emma I'm going. I'm just going to show up there and make sure my daughter's okay. Coincidentally, Emma's mom arrived an hour, 2 hours after Emma was last seen. The events leading to her disappearance were someone who knew Emma ran into her downtown Victoria. She didn't have her shoes on. She was disoriented and kind of talking nonsense. The friend talked to her for a few minutes and eventually called the police and said, this young woman I know is in distress. The police came and checked on her, and they talked to her for about an hour or so, determined that she wasn't, a risk to herself or others, and they left her on the side of the street. It was November.
With no shoes?
No shoes, disoriented. And that was the last time she was ever seen. So it's a complete mystery where she went. There's been a whole bunch of unconfirmed sightings from that point on of people who thought they saw her, but nothing confirmed. Last time anyone saw her was those police talking to her. So it's a really dark, really tragic story. And Emma, like, what comes out in the story when if you listen to my series, it's a lot of interviews with like friends and family of Emma's. And so the mystery and the story of her disappearance is really fascinating, but just as fascinating is the story of Emma and her unique personality and the cool little things she did throughout her life. So there's a lot of layers to the story.
It's almost like she was like living in the wrong time period.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I get that. She was very much like, she would have been at home in the 60s.
Yeah,
she would have had
Bohemia.
A blast at Woodstock. And it's that story in Canada, it's well known. CBC, which is like our national news network, they did a really good documentary about her called Finding Emma that is available on YouTube that does a great job of telling her story in like a 40-minute version. But if you want the 8-hour version, I have that on my podcast. Yeah.
What are you where are you at now with that? Are you still communicating with the family and friends, and do they give you any updates or anything?
Sadly, there hasn't been updates.
Yeah.
The biggest update is that there's talk of a documentary being filmed. I heard a release that they were planning to have something out for, I think, fall of this year, but I haven't heard anything since. In this documentary, what I understand, I'm not involved in it, but I believe it's people close to the family. It's not like a production company or something. I think it's people close to the family doing it. So I don't know what's going to come of it, but it's that sounds interesting. I'll be really curious to hear if any news comes. But sadly, they're just like Maura's case. You look at the last 5 years, there's all these kind of tips and clues and leads that seem really promising, and that's in the end nothing happened. So I don't think we're much closer to finding Emma or Maura as we were, the day or two after they were last seen.
It's really crazy. Tim and I were talking about this earlier on today regarding another project, but what comes with doing these shows and, your relationship with Emma's family, her disappearance is having an effect on you, is having an impact on you. And I'm sure you get stressed out about someone that, like, why, you know what I mean? Like, you never met her, you've never met her, you never would have met her family if you didn't get into this. It's just interesting to me that you're able to, and even like the other people in the true crime, like Morph and John Lorden, as much as he's a big jerk, real
asshole,
real know-it-all. But I'm just like,
he was so wrong about that video.
So wrong. It's like there comes an element of responsibility, and you have to take that on. And
I think it's just about being empathetic. And like in Emma's case, what happened, my experience with that was I watched that CBC documentary, and I thought, as I watched it, I'm thinking like, this Emma is so much like so many of my friends. And, if we were in the same city, I'm sure Emma and I would have connected in some way. And then I watched her mom talk about searching for her. And I'm like, that reminds me so much of all my friends' moms. And I just felt, just immediately, it just pulls at your heartstrings. It's that's what happens to me. And it's And that's Emma's story, but other stories I'll meet. Like there's, I recently covered a story, the disappearance of Holly Ellsworth Clark. I did an episode about Holly. She's a missing person. She's only been missing several months at this point. I don't think it's been a year yet, but that's another one where I knew the story and I felt she was a musician who disappeared. Just like Emma, a very similar kind of events leading up to her disappearance, including a phone call to her parents asking for help getting home, which is really weird. But when I learned of Holly's story, I was like, man, like that seems so much like the type of people I run with. And that kind of made me feel a bit of a connection. Then I offered to do an episode and I got to meet her dad and talk to him. I'm like, and as I'm doing it, I'm like, this guy reminds me exactly like my dad. This is how my dad would react. And that just makes you feel like I got to help, in any way I can. But it's, I'm sure you talk a lot to a lot of families of missing persons or people who are, victims of unsolved crimes or whatnot. It's out of just being like a human with a big heart and being empathetic. You just feel like you need to help in some way. Sadly, the best I can do is make an episode of my podcast about it and tell my friends, but yeah.
Well, I mean, you're also getting the word out there. You have a platform and you're using that platform to raise the awareness of these cold cases and these missing people. And I mean, it's time that this sort of industry just grabs the proverbial bull by the horns of that and says, there's going to be mistakes that you make along the way. You're probably not going to please everybody. You're going to piss off some people, but overall you will end up, in spite of everything, you're going to crash through something and someone's going to slip up. Something's going to happen. Yeah. Someone's going to read an article and they'll get nervous, or they'll say, I know that guy, or I know that person who did that. They might have said something to me.
Yeah. I think it's a bit of joke. Like there's no hiding the fact that what we do as kind of storyteller podcasters, there's a big part of that entertainment. So you find a story that's interesting and you tell it in an entertaining way, but you need to kind of balance that with advocacy. And so I try to find an interesting story that's going to grab people. And then in telling that story, I try to get whatever good I can out of it. So maybe that good is, having the story be effective enough and entertaining enough that all these people find out about it and they get the facts, they see her photo, they learn about where to call if they have any information, and they learn, enough that I almost see it as I tell them an interesting story and I just push them towards where they can help if they decide to. So that's kind of how I sleep at night.
That's the thing that you guys do, though, and what draws me to certain podcasts and repels me from others is the responsible way and the heartfelt way in which you take care of these stories. It's not just, putting the information out there and walking away. When you're, producing something, or you're asking questions, or you're communicating with an advocate or a family member or something, the genuine nature of it really comes through. And that was one of the first things that made me reach out to Tim and Lance, way back 5 million years ago, was just the way that, when I first started listening to the Maura Murray podcast, how they talk to people and how they treated people. So the work that's done in the podcast community, from everybody here who's here to do it for the right reasons, the responsible reasons. I, as somebody who's working on the other side, working, that as my job, I appreciate it. And what I hope to see is in the future, a lot more law enforcement and prosecution agencies taking advantage of what you guys bring to the table, like all of you, and everybody in this chat too, because there's so many great podcasters who are in this chat.
Yeah.
And that's my final word for you guys, and I'm going to sign off of this thing so that way I can turn on some kind of other air conditioner or something, so that way my fans stop distracting.
Go dim the lights. Dim the lights. Head on over to Midnight Morph and have yourself a party. But yeah,
that sounded suggestive.
Indigo Morph.
I love it.
Yeah.
But the money, really, we do it for the money.
I mean,
money. Absolutely.
Obviously.
It's the money. I can't even tell you. God, I have so much money.
Oh, look at that rug behind you that you're using. Is that soundproofing, that rug?
that is that's soundproofing. It's also my bed sheet, and yep,
That
And your
screams,
towel.
that screams
bath
money.
towel.
Yeah. My towel, and it's also what I filter my coffee through. There we go. Brought it full circle. Done.
Yeah.
Oh
No,
my
it's
gosh.
you get that. I get that the kind of discussion, the question about like why you do it and how you justify, digging into these dark topics and whatnot. Yeah, I find people ask it a lot, and I've never had any kind of question. I have no problem. I don't feel like anything I do is like harmful or wrong. Although I do get lots of criticism, but I find I don't know about you guys and your experience, but I find a lot of the criticism I get, it's obvious that they don't even listen to my podcast. So it's just this, like when I did, here's an example is when I did after the murders in Nova Scotia, maybe a week or two later, I did an episode that was the police had done a press conference where they outlined the timeline. Like, here's what we know about the attack. And they outlined like at this time he did this, at this time he did that. And I did an episode that was like a friend and I basically just talking through the timeline and giving our thoughts and just clarifying some of the points and whatnot. And I put it out. There was nothing wrong. Like, I didn't think there was anything insensitive about it, but I had a bunch of people write kind of like hate mail to me as if it was like I was, you're capitalizing on a tragedy and all this. But the things they were saying, it's like I could tell they didn't listen to my podcast. They just heard I made one or saw someone share it or something. And I don't know. I never feel like I've gone too far with anything. I don't think I'm even capable of it.
Yeah, we definitely talk out a lot of decisions and things like that. Everything is I would say thought out between the two of us, and sometimes we bounce stuff off of friends like Michelle, and other
James
people.
Renner.
I mean, anytime we get problems or criticisms or someone is saying you shouldn't have done this or that, I screenshot my bank account balance
I was like,
and I send it to him, and I'm like, do you have a problem?
Any questions?
Any questions, buddy?
I will all of a sudden turn into David Pumpkins.
Right. David podcast.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah, the money makes it worthwhile.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, right.
It does.
But speaking of all these cases, these missing person cases, Lance, we got to do a Maureen night here on Get Vocal, don't you think?
I think that it's kind of not overdue, but I think it's due. I think we're at the point now where we got to do that.
You haven't.
I know,
you
right?
You know what? So there's an empty space right here. I don't know if I'm pointing in the right direction. I could see. You know what you could really do? You two, Renner, John Smith, and just let them fight it out. That would be like Get Vocals ratings. I would be that would be must watch television. And the way people could just like connect and hop in like that, man.
Yeah, I mean, we might break Get Vocal.
Yeah, I can tell you exactly what'll happen though. We will set it up. James Renner will be like, "Sure, no problem." John Smith will be like, "Absolutely, count me in." And 15 minutes in, John Smith will be having internet problems. He'll be freaking out in the message side, like he'll be just messaging like
a cease and desist will show up.
A cease and
some other person.
This is a callback to
threatens to lawsuits.
This is a callback to Spreecast, RIP. That had a very similar kind of site as Get Vocal, actually, and we did a few live shows on there. And we had invited John Smith, and he had some technical difficulties, so we had to kind of relay his message through the chat. I believe that's like episode 25 and 26 of Missing More Marty.
Really a wonderful moment. A wonderful. He's
like 4 years ago, Lance.
Losing his mind in that chat room.
That was a good callback.
Yeah.
But the way people can just hop in like that, this would be a perfect venue for that kind of a discussion. Maybe not with those guys, but just for that community and that topic. So many people have things to say.
Yeah.
You could do a marathon.
Yeah, I think it would have to be a couple hours at least. We couldn't even dream about getting out of there in an hour.
Yeah.
Oh God, we've already been going over an hour on this, and
it
we've
feels like
covered
5 minutes.
Yeah, exactly. And the best
Yeah,
part, Jordan, is you could boot them too. Like you can just you can boot them right off the screen. We could boot you
That
right
would-
now. How do you feel about that? We could boot you right now.
You want me to
Figures-
boot you? Watch. I will boot you. What?
You know what? I think I'd take it better than John Smith would. I got chips upstairs and Netflix. I'm good. I think John Smith, I would love to see you boot him and see the comments. That would be a good moment.
It'd be so good. It'd be so good.
Just want to give a special shout out to Justice for DJ in the chat room. That is Amanda Shirley. We're going to be talking to her pretty soon on Crawlspace. She did an episode with Chris Duet and Criminal Perspective called Survivor Perspective, and it's really captivating. I listened to that today, and we're just starting to kind of dig into that case. And thank you very much, Amanda, for being the advocate you are to your brother's case. It's incredible, and just really impressive.
Her brother's a survivor of a crime?
No, her brother is a victim. Her brother passed away. Well, he was murdered, honestly, and it was sort of ruled a suicide. It's a bit of a wacky.
I'll listen for that one.
It's a big wrong.
And criminal perspective usually deals in the subject matter of incarcerated mass murderers, spree killers, and they correspond with them and they talk about them, and they have like a sub show, like a branch off show that is survivors' perspective. So it's victims, family members, and friends, etc. So they get that perspective as well. Chris Duet and Andrew Dodge, they're not just two handsome fellas. They got guts. They got guts.
But they are really handsome.
But
it kind
don't
of
get us wrong.
It kind of supersedes all the other work that they do.
It is distracting.
Yeah. But
again, Get Vocal would break if Chris went on and grabbed that spot.
He's all tattooed up, right? I think I saw
He is. He is, yes. A lot of tattoos. More than Lance, I think it's safe to say.
I'd say 1 or 2 more, 1 or 200 more. The next Get Vocal, I'm gonna have a tattoo on my face. I'm getting a face tattoo, guys.
Speaking of next Get Vocal, Lance, do we have can we make this announcement?
I think we can, because we had a really great conversation twice with this guy's manager. Man, I really want to talk about that. But we're going to have, speaking of the Moore Murray band back together, we will have retired U.S. Marshal Art Roderick on the show next Thursday, and he will be talking about the Lady of the Dunes, which he has a direct connection to. His father was one of the original investigators for the Lady of the Dunes, whose body was found in the 70s on Cape Cod. Yeah. What was that, Tim?
I believe it was Chief of Police.
Chief of Police. Yeah, Chief of Police. I was going to say that, but I wasn't sure. But it doesn't matter if we're wrong. If we're wrong, we just say, oh, we're sorry. We cash our paychecks. But no, I'm kidding. But we're going to have Art Roderick on next Thursday, and it's going to be a great conversation. Everyone should join in, because he is an amazing person to talk to, and he's got amazing stories. And you all will witness him thanking me for allowing me to, for allowing him to give me a U.S. Marshal pin. So he's going to thank me because I let him give me a U.S. Marshal pin.
That is really big of you to let him do that.
Doesn't have any U.S. Marshal pin.
I was there's that in the photographic evidence.
I just unmuted myself. There's no U.S. Marshal pins.
There's photographic evidence of him giving me a pin on our hike. We'll put it in the show notes.
I have photographic evidence of him giving you a wedgie on that hike.
Because he was trying to be all buddy, and he's like, let me do this. And he gave me a wedgie. And then he was like, here you go. It's been a real honor being on this hike with you. And I was like, oh, Art. And I got him in a headlock, and I gave him a noogie.
You guys went tumbling down the mountain together.
Yep.
Some Boy Scouts jokes being made. Coincidentally, Lance tied a really nice knot right before he got the pin.
I did. It's all about where the rabbit goes in the hole, Jordan.
Jordan.
Okay.
Jordan Bonaparte, thank you so much for joining us here.
Man, thanks for having me. I'll put up with you guys anytime.
Get vocal tonight.
Every Get Vocal, I want to end it more weird than the one that we ended with James Renner.
Yeah, shit gets crazy after like 10:10. It's all bets are off.
They call it the 11sies. I don't know if you guys got cats, but around 11 o'clock, cats kind of go crazy. My brother always said it's the 11sies, so I think that's what we got a case of.
I like that.
Yikes!
All right,
I like that. Yeah.
Yeah, if you have it, like, see that you have. Yeah, I see Michelle in the comments. It's like, yes, she probably has a cat. If you have cats, like around that time of day, they just go crazy.
Yes, lots of cats from Michelle. Lots of cats. But yeah, she fosters cats. But yeah, okay. Thank you very much
Thanks for having me.
Listening, and thank you, Jordan Bonaparte of the Nighttime Podcast. Make sure to check out his show, subscribe to it wherever you listen to your podcasts, and we'll see you next Thursday night.